We're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this panel session about local development environments in Drupal. So this is a continuation. Last year in Amsterdam, we confirmed that everyone can add their own favorite Drupal development tool. Is this the same happening this year? That's the question. How are we on the way of standardizing on top of something more uniform? At DrupalCon Global, the discussion went to another level, and some numbers were actually revealed. This time, we will have an awesome panel with people from Lando, Doxal, DDEV, Cloud ID, Launchpad, in Drupal VM. I hope I didn't miss anyone. So with me, I have, my name is Ricardo Amaro, by the way. I'm from Acquia. I manage DevOps and SRE there. And with me, I have Katherine Druckman, and she will be basically from the user side. And then I have Aurélien Navarre, from representing Cloud ID, Jeff Geerling, Drupal VM, Matthias Mikox, Launchpad, Mike Pirog from Lando, Oleksiy Shekulaev from Doxal, and then finally Randy Fay from DDEV. One quick thing, you should have a live Q&A part where you can actually put your questions. Like I see there's some questions already there. Let me see, it's refreshing. We will have time for these questions, so go ahead and put your questions meanwhile while this is starting. And the panel will start with a couple of minutes per panelist to actually present their own thing. So I start with Katherine. Hello, Katherine.
Hello, Ricardo.
You are here representing the user, so go ahead. Tell us things.
Sure, I will tell you things. I'm Katherine. I actually don't contribute to any of the projects we're talking about today, but I'm here to give you my perspective as a user who has tried a lot of environments and usually just use a homegrown DIY native environment. I've also done a few different types of work, and I find that my needs change depending on what I'm working on. I've built and maintained production sites, some larger scale than others. I've worked on software products. I've done some Drupal core and contrib module contributions. And I think the needs are a bit different for each. So what do I use? I actually used MAMP for many years while on a Mac until I found it too limiting. I was frustrated with its performance. I found its configuration to be a bit of a hurdle. So now I've been using a local DIY AMP stack for a while now, and it works very well for me. I always used a native LAMP environment on Linux machines when I was using them, but I confess I would mostly use Macs over the years. I've also recently been working with Acquia's Cloud IDE, which Aurélien will talk to you a little bit more about. I use it every day now alongside my local setup. It's great for unifying a team experience. I've also been playing with Lando for the past year, but I don't use it regularly. Though I plan to change that. I expect that if you ask me in 6 months, I'll tell you I use a combination of Lando and Cloud IDE. Maybe I've gotten tired of the cruft, I don't know. My background is that I ran all the Drupal stuff at Linux Journal for 12 years, and for that reason, I always wore a few hats, one being technical, the other being slightly journalistic, and generally a DIYer in the spirit of the sort of work we did covering open source generally. So for that reason, I've done a lot of experimenting. I've played with most of the projects I think we're talking about today, but ultimately settled on what was most comfortable and easiest for me, though they all absolutely have strengths. I think we're creatures of habit, though, and it can be tough to make a major change to our workflow without a pressing need. I know a lot of people who would never dream of using a native DIY install like I do and only use VMs or containers. And I know a lot of people who do excellent work with a homegrown setup like mine or with MAMP for that matter. So
great. Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. So next, I'll pass the word to Aurélien. You have like 2, 3, whatever minutes you like. Just keep it short to actually introduce your own Cloud IDE from Acquia. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo. Hello, everyone. My name is Aurélien Navarre. I'm a product manager at Acquia, and I'd like to talk to you about a slightly different approach to developing Drupal. We all know about the constant struggles when it comes to setting up and maintaining local dev environments. If you're on Windows, pretty much everything is hard, in particular working with Docker volumes and networking. If you're in a company where the IT policy is essentially blocking you from installing any software at all or creating firewall exceptions, then things become complicated very quickly. And if you're part of those developers willing to get their hands dirty and doing DevOps all the time, then it's, I think, when we need to step back, because as Drupal developers, at the end of the day, what we care about is to ship new features on time, not to struggle with our dev environment. And this is the main reason why we've created Acquia Cloud IDE. In a nutshell, it's the only web-based IDE for Drupal development. It is a fully optimized LAMP stack with all the Drupal tooling you can think of, which comes pre-configured out of the box, so you can start developing Drupal right away. For example, Xdebug just works. PHP code sniffer runs automatically with the Drupal sniffs you need, and you can run your Drupal functional JS tests easily because we've installed and pre-configured the Chrome driver for you, so you don't have to. Really, it's just a dev environment that is made by Drupalists for Drupalists. And it's not only that, Cloud IDE is fully disposable, scalable, and reproducible, so you no longer run into any kind of environment disparity at all. So when you think about it, more than a decade ago, we were all talking about moving our assets to the cloud because we couldn't get bothered with maintaining our servers anymore. It's 2020 now, and we think it's time for you to consider making the same transition. It's still your LAMP stack and IDE, but now it's in the cloud.
Okay, thanks for that. That was really good presentation. Okay, so next I have Jeff Geerling. Everybody knows Jeff Geerling. Go ahead. Drupal VM, how are we?
Yeah, let me mute myself so I don't get an echo on there. But I started working on Drupal VM a long, long time ago. This was before Docker was even a glint in the eyes of all of us who develop locally or in the cloud. And I still maintain it. I would say that nowadays it's more of a side project. I don't actually actively use it on a project that I'm working on right now, but I do still use it for a couple other projects and for some other local development. But it's kind of like the I guess you could call it the premier Vagrant and VirtualBox-based development environment for Drupal, because it can do so many different things, as you can see on the screen there. But I currently use Docker mostly for local development, and I deploy into so many different environments that I gave up on the idea of having my local environment exactly match production for everything a couple of years ago. But I get to use a lot of these different tools, and so one of the things I've been doing for the past few years with Chris Urban, who's not on this call, is try to send out a survey of Drupal developers to try to see where things are and how things are going for local development.
Actually, we'll see some numbers there. I guess we are probably going to have more surveys next year, but for this year, we will have some numbers next on the slide. So next is Matthias. Matthias, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dropsolid Launchpad?
Hello, my name is Matthias, as Ricardo said. I'm the platform architect at Dropsolid, and we built a tool ourselves. As in 3 years ago, we tried to solve some issues with our local development stacks from in the company. So what is Launchpad? Actually, it's a Docker-based local environment. So there are no other dependencies. It's completely integrated in the Dropsolid platform ecosystem. It's a very optimized Docker stack. So all the containers are really optimized for speed and for size. You can fully customize it. So yes, it's just use the same Docker principles, and also you can override it based on your local setup, on the setup for your team, on the setup for your OS, because it's also OS optimized. It solves some of the issues that you encounter on macOS for file syncing, or the I/O bottleneck. So it tries to solve that. It doesn't solve it completely, but it tries to. And also, it's very optimized for debugging and profiling. So a lot of our developers struggled with that, to get your PHP storm and Inkdebug working, both on CLI, so also for the debugging or profiling Drush, which HProf. So yeah, it's actually very tailored for the developers in-house. So it started as a pet project, because for my own sanity, I had to have something better than recreating my own stack and solving issues for other developers breaking their stack after they updated some local tooling. So yeah, it started out of frustration, and it's a full stack we use in-house. It's a lot of it's feature comparable with DDEV. It comes close to DDEV. We started almost at the same time, but when some are different path. But yeah, it looks somewhat like DDEV. Anyway.
Thanks for that. Next, we have Lando, Mike Pirog. Why don't you tell us about Lando and what's on with the plans on this awesome tool?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you to everyone for coming to DrupalCon. I hope everyone is staying safe in these dark times. My name is Mike Pirog. I'm one of the maintainers for Lando. Lando is a development environment that is also based in Docker. And its key design goal is you have a configuration file that you check into your Git repository. And that file should contain basically all the dependencies you need to develop your site, test your site, deploy your site. And you should be able to clone a repository down, run Lando start, and when Lando start is done, you should have all the things that you need to develop your projects. That means infrastructure, that means tooling, that could mean connections to remote sources, so like Pantheon or platform.sh or anything really. That should be true whether you're on Mac or Windows or Linux, or whether you're doing a Drupal project or a WordPress project or a .NET project. One of the nice things about Lando, it's free and open source, and we're independent, so we're not attached to any given hosting provider. I think that's allowed us to do some interesting things that others might not be able to do. And I think that's one of the big maybe differentiating factors for Lando compared to other things that are similar is we've got close partnerships with platform.sh and Pantheon and Amazee's Lagoon product, and we're currently talking with Acquia, and I think we're going to do an Acquia integration as well as one for Heresy WordPress VIP, probably not super relevant for this audience, but possibly relevant. And I think that's very exciting, and one of the very nice things about Lando is having these deep integrations with these hosting providers. So if you get your local development environment, but it's not built for one specific provider. It's not on an island. It's connected to sort of all the projects that you're working on. So to me, that's one of the things that makes it a little bit different than sort of the other environments.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have tried Lando several times in DDEV and most of this actually. Okay, so next, Oleksiy from Doxal. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about it? Is Oleksiy here? I don't think Oleksiy is here. Maybe he dropped. Okay. In any case, if he comes back, we will have him. So next, Randy, DDEV. What are the new things? What are you planning? What things are we having for us? You guys.
Hey there.
Yep.
Thanks for organizing this, Ricardo. Hi, everybody. I'm Randy Fay. I'm R Fay on most of the places you know me. And I'm the maintainer of DDEV Local, which is another command line based Docker Docker orchestrator, I guess we can say. DDEV is easy to learn, comes up fast. Starting a project is usually like 20 seconds. Got great fast community support. Runs the same on every platform. It runs on Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and WSL2. And we'll have it on the Apple M1 as soon as Docker is ready for that. You can run a whole bunch of different projects. They can all have different configuration. It's one of the big advantages for teams and for diverse projects. So you can have one project that's still on PHP 5.6 and another one that's on PHP 8. You can have one that's on MariaDB 5.5 and another one that's on MySQL 8.0, and they can be running at the same time with no trouble. It's extensible with lots of services. Gets regular maintenance and new features. We're hoping to have more platform integrations and user customizable platform integrations for hosting providers in the next round. That's the most ambitious goal for the next version of DDEV, is the ability for people even to wrap their own integration for their own private hosting environment, as well as making it easier to do things like we want to add Platform SH, for example. We already do Pantheon and DDEV Live. So I've got a link there in the presentation, but you can just search for what's so different about DDEV Local, where I wandered on about the things that I think are important. And we invite you to try it out, and we're there to help you along the way in the Drupal DDEV channel and lots of other places.
Thank you. That was very enlightening. So I want to kickstart our discussion today here, and I have some really interesting results from the survey that Jeff did, and I kind of wanted to share this with you all. So I'm curious that Lando and Doxal have both grown, but DDEV alone has jumped up 4 spots in that survey that was done. While Drupal VM, the Dev Desktop, Vagrant, and Homebrew have all shrinked. Do you want to comment on that, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a trend that we've seen. Let me mute myself. It's a trend that we've seen the past couple of years in general. I think a lot of developers have been moving from a VM-based or a local, like building your entire local environment. And the slide just went away from me. There it is. And they've been moving towards something that's Docker-based, like Lando or just plain Docker. That's what I'm using right now for my personal site. And the reason why a lot of people are doing that is because it's easier to share those tools between members of a team. And it's easier nowadays to run that on Windows, Mac, and Linux without any real compatibility issues. And virtual machines still do some of that, but it's just a little bit, the layering and heavyweightiness of it is a little higher. So I think that's just a natural progression as the Docker-based tools have gotten so much better and so much easier to use. And the communities around them have grown so much. But I think that's just an interesting thing. The other thing is, with Drupal 8 and 9, and now soon in the next couple of years, Drupal 10 coming down the pike, everything has been moving towards a more structured environment. And so you need some of those tools that are built into these other systems like Lando and Doxal and DDEV. And additionally, with your development environment, you would want to use a tool that integrates. So like a thing like Cloud IDE or in GitHub code spaces or an IDE like PHP Storm, those have also been growing. It's interesting to see though, Visual Studio Code, I'm guessing partly because of the price, has also grown pretty dramatically. And some of the older tools like Atom and Sublime have kind of gone back a little bit in terms of usage as VS Code and PHP Storm kind of take over the space.
Does anyone else want to comment quickly on these survey results? I bet Randy has to say something.
The one thing that I'll bet that's really interesting that's happening right now, maybe even kind of since the survey, is I see lots of people jumping over to Windows WSL2 because Docker is so fantastic there. So Mac OS has had a stranglehold on developers for forever, and all of a sudden WSL2 provides both the Linuxy environment, the environment where you can do everything you expect, and incredible performance, and people are just going. And it relates to one of the questions about Docker performance, file system performance on Mac OS.
Great, awesome. Does anyone else want to take a stab at it? If not, then
we had exactly some kind of situation that Randy talked about. So a dev of ours, due to Corona pandemic, we were all at home. So he starts using his Windows computer, a powerful machine, to start developing. He made it work with or Launchpad. He made it work with WSL, and he didn't open his Mac anymore. It's just the performance improvement you have just by being on WSL2, and yeah, like Randy said, the Mac OS I/O issues. Yeah, it's still a pain if you want to develop on them. So yeah.
Interesting. That is interesting. Okay, so I wanted to go now to Q&A questions. So if that slide,
Alesky is here too. Alesky's in the green room.
Oh, he just joined?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So let's try and go back here to your slide, Alexi. There you go.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so
can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead and present us a little bit about Doxal.
Yeah, thanks. So Doxal is centered about building less tools to achieve the same flexibility that basically Docker Compose gives you. This was the main idea behind Doxal, is that we don't want to invent another dialect, because whatever we would do would be more limited than Docker Compose is. And Docker Compose is a great tool. So what we tried to build, what was the main idea behind Doxal, is to put some agreements, some conventions behind Docker Compose to make spinning up your local environment easier than it is with regular Docker Compose, and also make it cross-platform. Because with Docker Compose, if you have a team that uses different operational systems, obviously they have to change it manually. Well, that's the main things that we wanted to solve with Doxal. And over the time, it evolved. And it's still cross-platform. This is the main idea. That's why it works everywhere. And we have been developing different file sync options, because we all know the pain of syncing your files with Docker. And frankly, this is the main hurdle of Docker on desktops and Docker as a local development environment at all. And that's why we are that's why we're developing, keep adding those options, and hopefully we'll continue adding those as things evolve, and hopefully we as a community land on some singular option in future, but that's just not there at the moment. That's why in Doxal you can have NFS, you can have Unison, which has its drawbacks but works to the extent, or you can completely disconnect your container file system from your host and use copying tools like Docker Copy. Okay. For those who don't know, one of main advantage of Doxal is cross-platform automation that you can build. Usually people build in Bash, but you can also use PHP and Node. And we have a lot of pre-configured projects that you can just spin up in a matter of minutes with Fin Project Start.
Okay, thanks, Alexei, and thanks for being here with us. That is great. We're now going to jump to Q&A sessions. If people in the organization can pull down the slide so we can see us all in the meeting, that would be great. So I go for the first question, which is a very, very interesting question. So the question goes by this. Is some synergy or reduction between all of the tools represented and happening, right? And if not, what would make that possible, or what makes that impossible if we read the other way? Who wants to answer?
We do learn from each other, which is the good part. The bad part is, no, we don't seem to have any synergy. Everybody has it's like many things. Everybody has their own specialties and integrations. And remember that a lot of these tools aren't just Drupal tools. So DDEV has a specialty in Typo 3. Lando is working into the WordPress space more. I mean, DDEV does WordPress as well, but they have their own specialties and their own hosting integrations, and so we're not doing very well at consolidating.
Yeah, I would echo that for sure. Randy and I have done these things like a million times at this point. I know that him and I don't feel like Lando and DDEV are competitors in any sort of way. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that these tools are the same, but they're built for different reasons and for different audiences. Like Lando, only like 20% of Lando users are using it for Drupal. So Drupal is like a small segment of the total amount. But on the tool consolidation front, this is actually happening. It's just not with the people who are on the stage here. So I know that DDEV is like provided itself as a solution for I think Typo 3, for example. Like they're not making their own thing now. Like Lando is helped build Pantheon's local dev environment and Platform's local dev environment. So we don't have two more tools there either. So like there is some consolidation that is happening. I think it's just not with the people who are on the stage.
I wanted to pick the brain of our user here, Katherine. Do you think that's happening? What? Oh, you're muted. You're probably muted. That's fine.
That's a good question.
What is your feeling? Is that really happening as a user?
I don't. As a user, I can't say that I perceive that happening. But again, it's hard for me to say, viewing it as from an outsider perspective. I'm not intimately involved in the projects themselves, so. But as a user, I can't say that I see any of that happening.
Anyone wants to talk to this question again, or just to finish?
I think we enrich each other definitely with the ideas at the scene. I think every project has its own, how do you call it? Reason. I don't know. That's how we call it. Something very special about the project that you love. It's like a car, right? You choose a car because technically all cars are the same, but you
that
still
is
pick
actually
it.
Funny.
And yeah, and I think synergy is making synergy out of them would just produce another project. It's like that HKCD comic, you remember. You have 14 standards. Oh, we need to invent standard to join them all. Situation, you have 15 standards. That's, yeah, it's not going away.
Okay, cool. So jumping to another question, and this actually has a jump there, and it says, I tried to jump on Lando, but I experienced slowness on Windows 10. What is the best tool to actually use on Windows 10 without having a VM? And then it puts like, oh, I know, move to Linux.
No, the answer is use WSL2 on Windows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lando, DDEV works great there. I think Lando works great there. I'll bet you Doxel works great there. So the answer is use WSL2 or use NFS. I think that all the tools allow NFS. The performance of our regular Windows DDEV with NFS is adequate.
I would also add that it's very hard with file sharing. It degrades performance greatly, and that's why, like in Doxel, you can disconnect your use Doxel volumes none and disconnect container completely from your file system. I'm pretty sure it's possible with other environments, and guys can chime in on that. But one of the setups I would recommend for someone who is looking for the top performance with Doxel is disconnect that, use Doxel volumes none, and then use VS Code server. You can actually have VS Code in a container and edit files directly there. You'll have maximum performance. It will be like native-like.
But you have complete risk, right? I mean, anything goes wrong and you lose everything, right? So.
Oh no, you can still work with Git. You're still supposed to use Git from within your container. You just edit in files directly there.
Yeah, we try to experiment too. We try to just locally and make some kind of hook or a file watcher locally, very simple thing, or just on save, sync it to the Docker copy to your image, and it's insanely fast. And then, like for debugging purposes, you want to just debug through something. All the data is in your container, and the container itself, there is no local I/O anymore. It's very, very fast that way.
Actually, Oleski, I didn't understand. You're using Docker volumes, which is fairly safe. That would be fast. I'm going to take a look at that. That sounds very useful.
By default, we use Docker volumes over NFS usually, but in Doxel you can have it's Doxel volumes none, and it disconnects completely. You're not using any shared volumes. The volume will be native to the container. It will not be connected.
The same way we use it too. Yeah, that's very fast that way.
I would echo what Randy said initially. It's like a first thing to look at, which is regardless of what tool you use, if it's a Docker-based tool, like moving to WSL, that's like everyone that I've talked to has basically expressed a night and day sort of reaction when they switch. We have people on our team who are longtime Mac people who are now running Windows as their dev environment because WSL is so nice.
Cool. So I'm going to pick another question from here. It's going to be, I think I saw a question here was saying, asking if Cloud IDE is a local development environment. So that was a question.
Yeah, so this question in chat. Essentially,
can you say also, while you're answering it, whether it's just total vendor lock-in or whether we can try it out?
Yes, sure. So I answered this question by saying we don't need to think about local dev environments only. It was local because we didn't have a choice before. Now we have other options. You don't have only Cloud IDE. You have Codespaces from GitHub. You have Cloud9 and several DIY solutions as well. So the idea is that now you have the tools and the file systems that work for you to be able to have some good productivity in the cloud, and that just works. And in terms of vendor lock-in, it's based on top of an open source UI called Thea. So there's no lock-in per se. The only lock-in that you can have with Cloud IDE, because I can only talk about this, is the integration with a cloud platform inside Factory, which is obviously some custom integration. But technically, it's still your code base, it's still your DB, it's still your files. We're not blocking you from getting access to configuration files. So it's just your box, but this time it's in the cloud. So it's really the only difference from your local dev environments.
So we can all try it out today without an Acquia account or anything?
You do need to have an Acquia account, and you do need to have a cloud subscription. We want to be able to have Acquia Cloud free evaluator starts with an IDE instead of having the regular trial experience, but it's slated for 2021. So not yet, but it's on the horizon, obviously. Yeah.
Thanks for answering that. So I have a hard question here. It says the MacBook M1 ARM processor is quite disruptive for most tools based on Docker. What are your thoughts, and do you think it will be solved soon?
They're demoing it right as we speak at the Docker Community All Hands.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
I'm missing it.
There's also one other interesting thing that I've been working with Raspberry Pis for years now, and they use ARM processors, which are the same architecture as this new M1 processor. One thing that's happened in the past 2 or 3 years is almost every Docker image that I've used is now being built for multiple architectures. So you can run it on Intel or ARM natively. And I actually, yesterday, I converted 2 of my images. I have like 15 or so left to do.
Nice.
But it took like 10 minutes. And now there's open source tools from Docker like BuildX. It lets you make it so that it can run on the M1 and on Intel chips and on Windows and everything just by changing a couple configuration lines. And as more and more Docker images,
when Docker is available,
it'll be super easy for maintainers like me to switch.
All of DDEV's containers are already ready with ARM64 and already run on Raspberry Pi and other ARM64 places. But Docker Desktop isn't ready yet, so we'll see when that comes. I hope it comes soon, and we'll see. But they may have the same exact problem with the file system, which has been the problem all along. ARM64 architecture doesn't solve that.
No, indeed.
So another thing from Chris, he asks, is there even a common language between these tools that would enable any sort of cross-tool development consolidation? And that is a tough one. Is there any common language?
The common language is Docker Compose. For
Docker Compose, yeah, definitely.
Using a VM.
Well, actually, I think all the I think it's Randy that said that we're basically all Docker Compose orchestrators. We just assemble a file that makes something work with containers we provide ourselves or with some other configuration. So yeah, I think Docker Compose is the base language of every tool. Yeah, Docker-based tools.
Okay, but Cloud IDE is Kubernetes, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the next question is, a lot of the environments use Docker. What's great, but did you see some light on the horizon in terms of slow performance on Mac? I think this was responded already, but anyone wants to give a stab at this?
So
Again, usually
we worked really hard
slow
on it this year, and haven't really succeeded yet.
You're trying. Good job. Okay, cool. What about the local dev environment called Docker for Drupal, if someone knows it? The user, Katherine, have you used that one?
I can't say I've used it. I've looked at it. I've read some documentation. I think it's, I think something that we said earlier, that each one of these tools has something special about it. There's a reason why you settle on one thing or another, and for whatever reason at the time that I evaluated, it didn't have a special thing that made me want to try it out. So I mean, again, but every user is different. Your needs are different. So, I think you have to find what fits your use case. But I haven't had enough experience to speak to it.
Jeff has always included it in his survey, I think, and it's just been dropping off the chart, I think.
It's not even in the top 10, I don't think, anymore.
Yeah. I could answer the Mac performance question. If it either improves or I have a nice Linux laptop on standby to switch all my work over to. So I think that's the answer. There are a lot of really great Linux laptop manufacturers now. So it's a great time to become a more full-time Linux user.
We back you up on that, Katherine.
Ditto.
Okay, so Docker 3.0 just popped out. Are you all ready? Are you all ready?
It's like during the call.
It was during the call, yes. This is all at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyone wants to answer to that, or we'll just leave it for next DrupalCon?
They released on Linux. They released the 20.09, which I think is probably what we're talking about. The Docker desktop versions bundle Docker in them, and the big change, I think, in probably what they released is that Docker 20.09 has a whole bunch of nice new things in it. And I gave it a test drive on Ubuntu yesterday and didn't encounter any trouble. So I would bet that that all of the Docker using things will be fine with that. I don't think that if they did a release 3.0 of Docker Desktop, that's going to do much other than the 2009 Docker internals. But I got to go back after this to the Docker community thing.
Good. So I think we still have time for one last question. Let me see what we have here. There's still a lot of questions. Pity. So this. Okay, so with DDEV Doxal Lando, could you still run Docker Compose commands directly, or do you have to run everything through the command to the main command?
Well, I can respond for Doxal. You can definitely run Docker Compose commands directly from fin Docker Compose in your command, and you can actually use plain Docker Compose files with Doxal if you'd like to. Again, this was the whole main idea of intercompatibility.
Yeah, for us the same. We just it's like the expert mode. You have the tool around to shuffle around the files, and if you want to go wild, you have your way to provide it in your own Docker Compose file and go for it.
Cool. Let me see. So Mosh asks a question. I'm not sure what. I'll try to rephrase the question. So is there a repo we can look at that uses VS Code, Server, and LAMP?
I think the easiest answer, Moshe, is you in WSL2, you just run the code command and it launches VS Code on Windows, and that's the easiest way to experience that. I think there's similar things, but that integration is absolutely perfect. So you just type in WSL2, you just type code dot, and it'll bring up the current checkout in VS Code on Windows.
I think that's response to it. Anyone else has questions? I think we have two questions here. It says, but it is open source and stable on macOS. So this is not a question. This is just, Mike, will this remain the same in the future? And then he sends a Twitter, I don't know, what is this? Maybe Tormi wants to clarify what he sent us, because I cannot see the Twitter there.
Yeah, I opened it up.
Okay.
So named me. It's about running Lando in production, whether we have plans to change that.
Okay.
We don't have plans to ever run Lando in production as like a hosting solution. That's definitely not something that we're going to do. I will say that we think Acquia's Cloud IDE is a good approach. So I don't know, take what you will from that.
And let me just add that DDEV now has casual web hosting based on DDEV that is casual web hosting. And of course, there's DDEV Live, different thing. But I guess we're about to end.
Time extended. Okay, we can
extended.
use it.
5 seconds.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. I hope this was profitable for everyone that watched the presentation. See you next year. We'll probably be, hopefully, we'll be live. I mean, presential. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye.